So hopefully you got a lot of our first episode with Ann. And if you enjoyed that, section 2 is going to even be better because you're going to learn how to successfully either operationalize or implement this to ensure that you have alignment to your goals and your organization in order to hit the outcomes you're looking for. So enjoy.
Some of the teams where you've like seen the lowest hanging fruit, where you've come into an organization, what are some of those kind of quick wins that you've seen in some examples?
Oh gosh. I mean, let's see. Literally, one of the first things we always do is we redesign the sales process and we re-implement it and we relaunch it. Usually we'll also make sure that the funnel is connected to that. That's one that I've had to do like out the gate. I mean, it's crazy that that is so foundational and something that like still I do really quickly within usually like a month and a half in joining an organization.
And can I ask you a quick question on that, Ann? What is your kind of, I'll call it your hack or your quick fix to redesign it? Because a lot of times when you're in startups, right, you can't take a year and a half to go, let's go ahead and redesign all this stuff. And it's like, no, we got to move quickly. So any, I'll call it observations or advice to those listening out there as a way to quickly be able to redesign it so that you can kind of keep moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to speak from the lens of if you're an enterprise B2B organization.
Yep.
Because there's a lot of different, go-to-market plays, but that's one that I know quite well. And, Dennis, I'm sure you have a lot to share here also. Having been a buyer and then also a revenue leader, you have to be really understanding the value and prioritizing that as part of your sales process. So I think the stages, the intricacies and the activities within the stage may be more nuanced, but your stages are going to be pretty standard. It's going to be like, find out who you need to engage with, make sure it's a high enough level, really do a deep discovery. Sometimes those are nested within discovery and then like a deep evaluation. Make sure that you're, having an understanding of what a business case looks like, what value means to them. Some people call this proposal. I've seen it called. One stage that is always missing, and I see this a lot, and then you see it in the actual data, is the alignment of the buying committee, which I've called like verbal approval, right? Really, really critical. I've seen a number of organizations go from proposal straight to contracting, and they're like, we don't know why there was this big fall off. And I'm like, because you didn't make sure that people were aligned around the proposal and the value you were going to deliver. And you need to make sure that you are spending time like championing that case internally and talking to all the different people. So when you get to contracting, it's just like red lines and like everything is pretty much agreed to. It's fast. That is one stage that I have had to introduce in multiple organizations. And it makes sense because in this world where there's, I don't know what it is now, but a couple of years ago, it was like at least 7 people were involved in a buyer committee via Gong. I think it's more now. You cannot underestimate this. They are going to have to take this and make sure that everybody else is on the same page that this is the right step because they're putting their neck on the line when they're putting money out the door. And so that is like a really key step. And then the nuances of it can be slightly different. I mean, some people use MEDPIC, MEDIC. It's just qualification methodology. Nest that within. Don't just copy MEDPIC, copy paste it, and put it in your CRM. Don't do that, please. The other thing I'll mention that I think is important, because I see a lot of RevOps practitioners do this, is they have, what is maybe your entry criteria to get into a stage? What are all the activities that you want your reps to be doing? And they're like, and we're going to make you enter all those activities into the CRM. Way to make your sellers hate you. That's a RevOps team. I'm like, I am going to treat my sellers like adults. We are going to track the most critical criteria. Hopefully it's just a couple that we need to, run the business. Like maybe it's at the tail end to set up the customer in the system. Like those are critical things you need. Or, maybe you should have the name of the decision maker. Okay, we need that, right? We need to know who that person is. Everything else, though, you assume that they have captured and you use your deal reviews. This is the other thing, Dennis, low-hanging fruit, operating cadence. I want to talk about that. My sellers, when I've led sellers, know, expect that I can call on you on any of those activities that you should have done in the stage or that you have a reason why you didn't do it. But if I call on you, you haven't done it, and you just progress it, it's not going to be pretty. So I treat them like adults until they give me a reason not to treat them like an adult. And then it's going to be an unpleasant deal review. And then they're going to quickly get on the horn and make sure that they're capturing that information and driving a consistent deal cycle.
Dennis, have you had similar, are you experiencing a similar thing that Ann just described here when you're, engaging with, bringing in new sellers and a new company and off you go and trying to lead the go-to-market efforts of the team?
Yeah, I think the point you said there about like alignment, like buying alignment at the client and not like single threaded, I guess, really, right?
Yeah.
Because I think, yeah, a lot of deals you see if they go very fast, skip stages, and it's one person at the client, I think you then have quite a few issues on implementation and success in the organization, particularly if your seller gets out of that situation and they just hand it off.
Yeah.
So I think that's one area. But I think that to that point as well, just making sure that people are getting to the ultimate decision maker is always so important. And even in the last few years become even more important where budgets are scrutinized more. I think for some organizations, like getting everyone aligned, trained on the same sales methodology and all that. I do think that businesses are maybe struggling more to sign off on that and are a bit like tighter around budgets, which
I agree.
means, yeah, that you also have problems. Yeah. Have you seen that too, Anne?
100%. I mean, if you think about it, yes. I was in an organization where I joined and they were doing well. They were doing well in terms of revenue and growth, but they were doing poorly in terms of attainment, right? But they had
Yeah.
product market fit. They did not have go to market fit. And very quickly getting in, doing my kind of like listening tour assessment, it became clear to me, VP of sales, SVP of marketing, that there was just, it was a very feature led sale. There was no real value story coming through. And we were seeing it in the data in that this was years ago when they were showing pricing and then our conversion rate was just going off a cliff. Literally just tanked. Everything just died. And I'm like, what is happening here? So I started looking at the calls, listening to the calls, looking at the pitch decks. I'm like, oh, you did no real discovery. You had no understanding of the problem. I mean, again, basics. Like it feels so weird to say this to like two CROs, but like, what are the problems they're really, really trying to solve? Why are these so important to them? What's going to happen if we solve these problems? The other thing I have to bring in, like positive business outcomes. The number of time I've said that word, call it something different, goals, impact. I don't care what people want to call it. What is the thing that we are going to impact and influence within the business if they buy our software or our tool or our widget? And if we have no idea what that is, that's a problem because that's a story they have to tell internally to shop it around, to like get it signed off and also say, hey, this was a good decision that we spent this budget. And so I bring this up because in that organization where you're seeing this big cliff hang or things going off a cliff, it was because they had not done enough discovery. And then they showed the price, which was a hefty price, and it scared away the prospect because they didn't understand what they were going to get for it. So as a result, we were like, okay, we need to install a real customer methodology centered on value. We chose value-based selling. And when I went out there and I shopped for the vendors, I mean, some of these are really expensive. I mean, if you want like force management, which is, gospel in some organizations, when I was at Medallia, that is what they did. But it's, it takes a lot of money, like several $100,000, and you have to be committed to it. Some people just don't want to take that risk. And then you'll be like, well, I'll do this other like half-baked one for $20,000. And then it's like, well, do you have a team that's going to like really ready to commit a lot of their time to installing this? And I mean, I know when I joined Tubular Labs and we did selling to zebras, you made us all read the book. It was like, that's how people spoke about the deals. It infiltrated all of our deal reviews, but we had to pay for that. Right. And so I do see like a lot of organizations, one, especially maybe if they are less mature and maybe more founder led and have not gone through that go-to-market transformation, don't know how critical that is for them to like get to this next stage of like scale up where it's not about your product anymore. It's about the customer. And so that's, I think, the hardest thing that I'm seeing is convincing these companies that have had success that like you have to invest in this thing and put your customer first and what they think about, what they care about.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting when I'm listening to you two, because what you guys are talking about, kind of how the process works, the sales process, which is what I asked you about. And the parts where you guys told me where the gaps are, which is either are you getting to the right people and or they're missing the step. They're able to go through the discovery and maybe they did a good job, maybe they didn't. They go through the proposal, which is your value proposition.
Mhm.
I think this is what I've learned, or what I've been doing here recently with some of the customers or the people that I'm helping with their go to market and that sort of thing, which is
Mm.
there's this part called the success proposition, which is not the same as a value proposition. The value proposition is sitting there telling you about, here's all the things that you said were important and that were problems and etc. But the success proposition, to your point, and ties it all together around what are the consequences for your organization if you do it or you don't do it. And
Yes.
this is how we as a company will mitigate the risk of you guys being successful. Number one, ROI, call it, net present value, call it whatever you want to call it. And then the second piece of that is mitigating the friction for you to somehow make sure your organizations can assimilate this thing simply and easily so that your time to benefit is going to be really quick. And that's what I've been working with some of these customers on, to say, this is what you would call your success proposition as opposed to your proposal and your value proposition. Now you should be able to get through contracts, if that's your last step, call it closing, call it whatever that you want. And that's where the big gap is, to your point, Ann. And I've seen that as well, and with the companies that I've been working with, especially for enterprise type of selling paradigm. So anyway, sorry to interrupt you guys there, but I thought that was interesting. You guys had the same talking about the similar thing, and I've also experienced that. And
Yeah.
we just happen to call it success proposition as opposed to step whatever it's called. Anyway.
Yeah. Great. And to that point where we talk about like startups, like smaller companies versus larger companies, do you have any advice for them, Anne, in terms of like how a product led or kind of product focused organization switches to a more go to market focus before they start hiring out a big sales team and everything, what they should do?
Yeah. I'm trying to think about this maybe with some actual tactics, right? Because the good
Yeah.
news is, if you're a product-led organization, you have all that product data. That's probably like your biggest like lead feeder is going to be like PQLs or PQAs or whatever you want, but product qualified account or product qualified lead, right? And so you have a lot of that data. I think the thing to start with is, okay, now you're trying to get to another point of scale. You're trying to bring people in, and now you have so much volume coming in. And usually, what I find is product led organizations also have a heavy amount of inbound. But what's happening on the other side of this is the sellers are like, oh my God, I'm drowning. Forest through trees, right? Like, what do I take first? Marketing's over here, like, we sent you all the leads. We're just going to keep sending leads and keep sending product. And then you know where this is going to go. Sales is like, I can't keep up. And then marketing's like, why aren't you responding to my leads that I'm sending? I mean, it's like a disaster, right? But also, of course it's happening. Of course it's happening, right? You have product market fit. These are good problems to have. So the first tactical thing I would say is, please, 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 please implement lead scoring. Even if it's just like, you need a way to filter it out and make sure. This is another thing that I find sometimes, and I haven't worked as much in product led organizations, so take this with a grain of salt. I have a lot more expertise in enterprise B2B. And the number of times I've went into organizations where they're more product focused, product led, and I'm like, so who's your ICP?
Yeah.
They don't know everybody. And I'm like, so like,
So true.
how do they filter, what is your SDR going to do or your seller going to do and all this stuff? And how do they know what to prioritize? Like, how do you, and then we have a high value action. I'm like, but that's not your ICP. That's something they're doing. So get really clear. You have all the data. You have a lot of data. Please just do a light analysis to understand who your ICP is. Please build that into your marketing funnel. And then please, please, please implement lead scoring. I worked with an organization recently that thought basically a lead was equal to an MQL was equal to an SQL. There was no funnel. Everything just got sent through. And I'm like, there's a reason there's a funnel. There's a reason. And so help your team, help the sales team. And like, I remember when I keep bringing up Tuber Labs because we worked together. There was a period of time, it was right as COVID hit, and we had to do like a reduction in force, and we had to reduce our sales development team. I think we had to reduce it in half. I think we went from like 4 to 2, if my memory serves right. At the same time, kudos to demand generation. They looked at, all of the leads that they were generating. But instead of just looking at the leads, because we have these internal QBRs, we looked at what we were getting for those leads and where we were getting most bang for the buck. And what we realized was LinkedIn ads actually really does nothing for us. It generates a whole bunch of leads, but none of those convert. So they made a strategic decision. They were not going to do that. So yes, in the next quarter, our lead volume dropped, but our conversion went up. And even though we had half the people, our conversion through to S0 and S1 went up. So it was the right thing to do. It's not all about the most leads. I don't care how many leads you generate for me if they don't get it through to pipeline. If my team is so overrun on the sales side that they don't like know what to tackle because, you know, they're losing their minds. So I think we have to just think about this is a human problem. Humans can only do so much at once.
Yeah, with LinkedIn ads as well, like that the company I'm at now, Precise TV, we found as well that similar. We were doing lots of it, getting emails, but they weren't great quality.
Interesting.
But yeah, but I think like it's not as easy as just turning on LinkedIn ads. Next thing, all these people are going to show up like really interested in your product or whatever. I think it's a case of like, okay, yeah, what is the content you need for LinkedIn ads? Who are you focusing on? And maybe it's wrong to treat it like this kind of cost per acquisition and stuff, but it's more like nurturing awareness and stuff. But yeah, have you found out that LinkedIn ads have worked at a lot of businesses you've been at?
No, I did work with one organization. They were really, I mean, they were like seed stage, like pre-A.
Yeah.
And for them, it worked because they were doing it. They did LinkedIn ads, and I think they did Google ads as well. But they were primarily founder-led sales, and they had a founder that was doing a lot of thought leadership. So they were
Yes.
using his posts, and they were getting inbound. But that was all.
Yep.
Like they didn't even do outbound at first because they were so small, right? They were just
Yeah.
trying to build awareness and demand, and in that case, it worked well.
Yeah. Okay. And actually something else that's really big and like we did it at Tubular as well was like the ABM, account-based marketing. Have you advice for people trying to do that or seen successful people do it well? Any advice for people?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I was talking with it's like the 2B show today. I was talking with Gina Patel, who's a VP of CS now, who worked with
Hey,
us.
Gina.
Yeah, hey Gina. And she actually brought this up. She's like, Anne, remember when you and Dennis and everybody like you led that like target list, like enterprise 180? I'm like, oh yeah. She's like, oh my God.
Yeah. I remember the Slack channels.
Right?
Even maybe.
All
Bro.
the Slack channels. So for anyone who's on here, one thing, Pat, and every time in the 5 organizations I was in-house reporting to either a CRO or a CCO or a CEO, one of the first things I was asked to tackle was a target account methodology. Not some crazy AI. I mean, now probably ChatGPT could do it, honestly. Just like a data-driven approach to help us prioritize what we think the right accounts based on certain profiles, usually linked to our ICP and where our SAM is, you know, like TAM, SAM, target accounts, etc. And so that we give our reps a starting point. But I don't even think it's around necessarily just the data piece. It's really around we as a go-to-market, sales, marketing, RevOps, customer for maybe expansion are all focused on the same set of accounts. Focus. That's it. It's less around the data. And I have made some huge mistakes being like, I'm going to have the best mathematical model. And it like went down like a house on fire, right? The model is important, but it's not the most important. The most important is like you all agree these are the accounts we're going after this quarter. A subsection of them are ABM. So where marketing is putting its dollars is amplifying where sales is outbounding, what SDR is out. We're all creating this surround sound. And that I think is the point. So it's not just ABM, account-based marketing. It's account-based everything, right? That I think is absolutely critical, particularly in an enterprise sale and particularly in a crowded world where people are hearing so much. You want them to be hearing the same. You want the customer to be hearing from the marketer, from the seller, from the SDR, the same message so that it's moving to the top as opposed to a really fractured message.
It's great.
It supports what you said earlier, Anne, because account-based marketing or account-based account management or, you know, whatever flavor it is that you're doing, it stems off of your ICP. And that's why, especially in enterprise, if you can't describe in detail what the ideal person looks like for you and be able to score against it, for lack of a better word, right? That, yeah, you should spend time here, or no, let's not spend time here, because otherwise you're wasting your time, right? Your probability of success is very low. So why are we spending time here?
Yeah.
right?
And I
A resource.
have to tell you something, and I'm curious, Dennis, if you see this in your world, and Pat, for the companies you advise.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm a venture advisor for Ridge as well, Ridge Ventures. So I get to like learn about cool new tech and tell them about tech, which is really fun. And I really enjoy it. And I'm a big fan of like action of orchestration. Like how are you going to help me do this thing across lots of different sections of the go-to-market? There are so many tools out there for like, we're going to help you enrich your data. And then we're going to help you, send the right outreach sequences. And then we're going to help you coordinate multi-channel and all these things. But what if you get the core group of customers that you're going to do all this stuff and you're going to have all this tooling for? What if you get it wrong? What if you're going after the wrong set of customers? All this doesn't matter. You've just spent all this money and all this tooling and all this setup on the wrong customers. So I was talking with an organization recently that like they actually help their customers identify the bullseye based on
Mm.
what and then say, okay, how far away from the bullseye do you want to get if you need more accounts? And I was like, that is a really compelling technology because their bet is all that other stuff just helps you do things more efficiently. We're going to help you make sure that you have the right set. I'm curious what you think about that, Dennis.
Yeah, I think like I think it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier. I think like having a really good idea of your ideal customer profile, and I think particularly like earlier stage companies, they kind of get confused with their one of their early clients or an anomaly versus their ideal customer profile, and
Yes.
then go after like, oh, this client that they have, but actually that client is very unique and not repeatable,
Mhm,
and sending them down the wrong way, wrong
mhm.
path. So I think that happens some clients, but I think like you outsourcing that, I think is like I think you really need to sit down and do the hard work in terms of
Mhm.
ICP, interviewing your clients, yada yada. So I think you could get clients, companies in to help you manage that process. Like I even remember saying to Zebra, like Jeff Kozer was coming in and helping us through a lot of this,
Mhm.
which I think could be valuable to then make sure you're focused on the right targets and stuff.
Mhm.
And I'd lastly say before I hand over to Pat would be like, I think a lot of products can help lots of potential clients, but it means that your sales team is probably not that focused. And even for that reason as well, you need kind of focus
Yes.
to the people that you provide the most value to like land, expand, repeat, rinse and repeat. So yeah, Pat, anything else to add?
Yeah, prioritize, focus, execute, right? I mean, that was the whole premise. And part of that was the ICP was kind of like the tip of the arrow where you should be focusing your time, right? And why this is particularly like with the customers that I'm advising or working with, right? Especially a lot of them are going from either founder led type of sales and trying to get more to a product market fit and a little bit scaling in terms of their sales efforts, or a lot of these companies where they have been product led growth and they want to scale up in terms of going into more of a solution based or value based type of selling proposition because that's the market they feel they can address. And so you guys have both nailed it on the head, right? You really got to understand your ICP. How do you understand that? Well, go out and talk to those customers that are either are your best customers, meaning that aren't the ones that were your first three,
Mhm.
and or go out and talk to your prospects who are currently in the funnel to see if in fact, and you have a third party do it. That way you don't have the stigma of, well, you're the vendor, so I'm not going to tell you what's going on type of thing, right? Have a
Mhm.
third party do it like we did with Kozer, and I do this now with a lot of the customers that I work with, but and have them ask those questions so that you can understand, yeah, are these guys something that do they have a problem that we solve? Is it something that is important to them? What's the consequence if they don't do it? And can we do this uniquely or not? And if you can get those questions and we can post that, Dennis, if we want on this channel here. I got a list of questions that I always used to use. And I
Mm.
know part of it was generated from Jeff Kozer's, what he used to use, but
Yeah.
and you can sit there and decipher that information really quickly. Just talk to like 3 to 5 of your best customers, and it will immediately start to take you to where you should be prioritizing your efforts, whether it's marketing, sales, account management, whatever. Where you're going to focus your resources, whatever resources you have, whether it's money or marketing campaigns, whatever it happens to be. And then how do you go about executing?
I would just say, one, I think you should absolutely post that, and I want to read it. And then not just the questions, and I realize the answers to those questions will vary, but like, what are the like general things that you're looking to see to validate, okay, this is somebody ICP. And the reason I bring this up is I keep thinking about this. I joined organizations where usually earlier stage, they don't really have a robust go-to-market. It's like they just had scrappy, smart people who were willing to learn, but they were like doing it for the first time. And so maybe they don't even know what ICP is. Maybe they just like took a stab at it. And so I think like there's an opportunity, and maybe part of the reason people get here is they actually haven't taken the time and maybe admit like, I don't actually know how to do that. And a lot of the times when I say, hey, what's your ICP? They're like, companies over X $million of revenue. I was like,
They're in this industry and this big.
That's
Okay, that's what we want. You know, it's like,
that's what it actually is, right? And so like, again, they start at this like really elementary surface level descriptor. And so I think if you can say, hey, all of you have never done this before, here is how you do it. These are the things. And then when I think through, my world, RevOps, it's like, great. Now you have all of that. Now we have to operationalize it. If you have the answers to all those questions and you like print it out or, send them a digital copy and you give that to your seller, you have made their job really easy in terms of qualifying in or out ICP in terms of your sales process.
Yeah. And that's it. So, and, all truth be known, all transparency, about 75% of the clients that I work with, I end up doing that for them because they don't have one. They don't know what that is and they don't know how to go about getting it. I mean, you can do the high level stuff like you talked about, but that's like saying, we're in weight loss reduction. Well, okay. Does that mean that you care about people that want to go to gyms, or you care about people that care about dieting, or what do you care about type of thing? Right. And so it's just too high level. And so it doesn't give them the opportunity to figure out, well, what is it about that, particular entity, or whether it's a person, it's a department, it's a company, that we can somehow bring unique value to, because that's where you're going to improve your ability to win. Right. And then that you can grow, et cetera, right? So you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and this has been a masterclass in go-to-market alignment, and I think we'll finish up here, but thank you so much. This has been absolutely great. And yeah, hopefully everyone out there has gotten something from this. I think we talked about like the importance of goal setting, CMOs and CROs, pipeline goals, and then back to basics, right? ICP, target accounts, all of that good stuff. So yeah, thank you.
Aligning your sales and marketing teams, which is at the end of the day, if you can't get those aligned, then all these wonderful things that we're talking about are all for naught. So
yeah. Thank you, Anne. Yeah. And
thank you, Anne. That was awesome.
Thank you. Bye-bye. The bar's closed, right, Pat?
The bar is closed. See you. Thank you.